It came as a bit of a shock when I went to San Francisco airport. I'm looking up at the gate D38 to fly from San Francisco to Tampa to give another lecture. And then suddenly somebody walks up and says, "Excuse me, your visa's been revoked." And then I look at the memo from the State Department. There's no reason why, nothing's been stated. It hasn't said any of the things that they would later go on to say online on social media. And then as they escorted me outside of the airport, there was this black car, the kind of things you see in the movies. And they told me, "Get in the black car." And it had tinted windows and everything. And I said to them, "I'm not getting in a black car just like that. I'm a British citizen. I need to call someone." They said, "You can't call anybody." And then I told them, "Well, I'm not getting in the car." They said, "You have 1 minute." So I called the CARE, the Council of American Islamic Relations, which is a civil liberties organization. Then when I asked them, "Can I call my family to let them know I'm okay?" a lady from behind grabs me, pushes me on the car and says, "All right, that's enough, you're under arrest." And she puts the cuffs tightly behind my back, puts me into the car, and then for the next 6 hours, I'm loaded in the back of a van later in this very, tight, claustrophobic place. They don't tell you where you're going. They didn't let me call a lawyer. Even when I got there, I told them, "Can I have my phone call now with my lawyer?" They said, "You'll get it, you'll get it." I had to call the lawyer at my own expense later. And I just found it was quite an aggressive experience, because I even said to ICE, I said, "Listen, I'm coming as a guest. I can just fly home to London." And they went, "This is not how this works." And each time I told them, "Guys, I've got things to do in London. I need to go home. My flight was November 2nd. And they insisted. They kept going until the federal judges came in, and highlighted that there's a serious risk of infringement on freedom of speech. In the end, the attorney on behalf of the government came and said, "Listen, let's just clear this up very easily. If you decide to depart, we won't make it difficult for you." What they were saying online was never said privately between the lawyers. And thankfully, I ended up home.
And you were held for roughly 2 weeks. In that time, did you have access to your lawyers? Were you able to call home? Were you able to call your wife, Sumaya, and speak to your family?
So for the first 3 days, I couldn't. On the second day, they told me that I was going to be transferred to Fresno. And I didn't know what that meant. The other inmates were warning me. They said, "Listen, what they tend to do is they tend to relocate you to different facilities to frustrate your ability to go to the courts." So when I informed my lawyer on the second day, I finally managed to get through on a 3-minute phone call with my lawyer. And the lawyer went to the judge and asked for a restraining order on ICE. And the judge awarded it immediately. The judge actually said in the restraining order, "We're deeply concerned that there are First Amendment infringements in this, and therefore Sami is not allowed to be moved from any facility." And then the government responded and said, or those in the other side responded and went to the federal judge and said, "You have no jurisdiction to look at freedom of speech for an alien," as they termed it. The judge responded within an hour saying, "We have full jurisdiction to look into it, because based on this case, there is a very serious fear that his freedom of speech has been infringed." And this is despite all of the things that were being said on social media. So when I had my court hearing on Monday the 10th, I told the judge said, "There's a deal on the table. Do you want to go home?" I said, "Yes, I've got things to do. I've got, work to do. I've got things to say and the like." And then they agreed, and on Monday was the court. Wednesday, I went home. But there is one thing I want to mention here, which is that what I noticed when ICE detain you is they don't catch you on the processes, they catch you on the loopholes. So I give an example. In my case, my original court hearing was on November 6th. When I went to Fresno and they cuff you on your feet, they cuff you on your hands, they throw you in a cell, you sleep in the foot cuffs. They kept me there with 24 hours until my legs were swollen. When I told the guards, "Look, my legs are swollen, visibly swollen," the guards simply ignored it. They only started treating me better when everybody at Sky News and the other media started raising their voices. They started treating me a bit better.
Sami, we're going to get to freedom of speech in a moment, but the original reason that ICE, Homeland Security, said was the reason they were detaining you was that you'd overstayed your visa. And then a spokeswoman for the US Department of Homeland Security said your visa had been revoked as those who support terrorism and undermine American national security will not be allowed to work or visit this country. How do you react to that statement?
One of the things that was quite fascinating is that I didn't have much access in terms of what they were saying outside. So I can tell you what they were saying privately. Privately, there was no mention of any terrorism whatsoever. Privately, the lawyers admitted that that video that was being used, which was stitched together, was inadmissible in court. The judges would never accept that video, and that was the view of the lawyers of the government, and that was the view of the lawyers that I had as well. If they believed what they were accusing me of publicly, they would have had no hesitation to charge me with it on the actual document. But not once did they mention it privately. Not once was it mentioned in the court. Not once was it put in the charge sheet, because they knew no evidence existed of any of the accusations they were making. And in the end, the deal was about face saving. I was happy to go home. I have work to do. They told me I can come back to America whenever I want. And of course, they get to say that Sami Hamdi ended up leaving America. The case gets closed, and it worked out for both of us.
Sami, the video that you refer to is something that was it was shared, a video clip by the pro-Israeli group Memory, in which they said that you praised the October the 7th Hamas attacks, and that you're heard asking members of the audience whether they felt euphoria. What do you make of a suggestion that these comments were the reason for your detention? And I know you say that it wasn't raised during your legal battle to come out of detention, but this was one of the things that was raised, this video clip that was widely shared of you celebrating October 7 attacks and asking the audience if they felt euphoria.
I think those who saw the video will see that it's stitched together, and those who listened to the full 2-hour lecture will see that in the very same lecture I condemn the violence. But what's also worth noting is that the act of stitching a video together in that manner is something that made the bosses at BBC resign when they did the Panorama documentary with regards to Donald Trump. In other words, being very much aware that that sort of manipulation of a video is enough to get the bosses of BBC to resign and also force a lawsuit from Donald Trump itself, which is why it was considered a moot point. I did not say anything that they accused me of saying. The video was clearly doctored and clearly stitched. The lawyers did not take it seriously. Neither did those in the media who later reported, clearly demonstrating that it's an infringement on freedom of expression with regards to Palestine, which is why I was detained in the first place. And that's why I think what they sought to use as evidence was categorically rejected by anybody with a serious attitude towards law and legal justice.
Sumaya, we've spoken to you whilst Sami was detained. Just tell me whether you received the support that you felt you needed, and whether the British government supported you through this ordeal, or asked you if they could provide any kind of assistance, given Sami is a British national citizen who was detained in the United States.
I have to say, while the staff at the FCDO have been friendly and have tried to help, the assistance that we received from the British government really, I would say, was really very disappointing, if I'm being completely honest. Right up to the end, to this morning, when we received an email with incorrect information from the FCDO, in which I was told that Sami would be flying back next week, when in fact he was already on the plane on his way to London. So I don't see that the British government has taken it seriously when one of their own citizens, a registered journalist, has been taken under false pretenses, has not been charged with any crime, and has had his liberty deprived of him. And I think this is really very concerning, that the British government is not taking more serious action with regards to our closest ally, the United States, to ensure that British citizens are protected. And I would say to British citizens who value their freedom of speech to be very careful, because, you know, you've got the World Cup in the United States coming up next year. If this could happen to Sami, there on a valid visa, a British citizen, a registered journalist, then it could very well happen again. And that's the last thing that we want to see to happen to anyone. We wouldn't wish this on anybody.
Sami, just finally, do you believe that pro-Palestinian foreign nationals are at risk in the United States and perhaps elsewhere?
It wasn't me specifically who was being targeted. I think that the attack came because of a lashing out, a hysterical lashing out on the part of the pro-Israeli lobby, that they are losing the American public opinion. This was less an attack on me and more an attack on the fundamental rights of American citizens. It was an attack on the freedom of speech in America, because there is a concern in the pro-Israeli lobby that all the polls demonstrate that they've lost the American public. All the polls show that this new generation of Americans are no longer pro-Israeli. In fact, they're much more pro-Palestinian than the generations that were there before. The issue was less about what Sami Hamdi says or what any pro-Palestinian is saying, and more to do with, why are Americans listening? How can we stop them listening? How can we stop this engagement between pro-Palestinian activists and ordinary Americans? It's not an onslaught on Sami's rights. It's an onslaught on the rights of the British and the Americans, or the right onslaught on their rights and their freedoms, an onslaught on their right to hear the truth of what's happening. The risk is not on the one who goes to America. The risk is now for the pro-Israeli lobby because they are collapsing rapidly as a result of good people hearing the truth.